Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. On behalf of Anna Nagar CP Studies Circle, SIRC of ICAI, I'm yours Hemant Kumar, Kanya. So we'll start our today's CP session. Before starting, as usual, we have a start with our ICAI motto. Just back for 1 minute.
सुप्तेषु जाग्रति येष सुप्तेषु जाग्रति कामं 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 कामंशो निर्विमाणः तदेव शुक्रं ब्रह्मा तदेवामृतमुच्यते अस्मिन् लोकः सर्वे तदूनात्यपि कश्चन एतद्वैत
Thank you very much. Once again, welcome to all friends for today's special CPE on ROC compliance for MSME sectors. So outside, I had to thank the speaker, a special guest today, Company Secretary Reema Jain Madam from Delhi. Thank you very much for accepting our request, Madam. And apart from that, today our chief guest for the program, Chartered Accountant Geeta Madam, well-known personality from Bangalore, ex-Bangalore chairman, sitting SIRC Treasurer. Thanks for accepting in the short notice, Madam, for joining today. Thanks, Geeta Madam. So I request Geeta Madam to give, not needless to introduce to our Anna Nagar CP members, because Madam is a very known personality to us. So because of COVID, we are not having any physical interaction with SIRC. Despite that, I'm proud and privileged to introduce Geeta Madam, Treasurer for our SIRC, for the giving the opening notes for the day, Madam. Over to Geeta Madam.
Hello.
Yes, Madam. Go ahead.
Yes. Okay. Good evening, one and all present here. Sorry, I was sitting outside of my office because since from yesterday it was pouring a lot and we had a power problem. So we didn't have power at office. So force of me had to come and sitting out. So a lot of disturbances will be there.
No problem. No problem.
Yeah. Thank you, Hemant, for inviting me to this Anna Nagar study circle. Really, this is my first. This is the first time I'm addressing to Anna Nagar CP chapter. Though I stayed in Anna Nagar West in a couple of years during my college days. My grandma was staying in Westmoreland, so I was staying for my education in Anna Nagar West. So no, it's like of the connect is. I feel like coming back to home. Thanks for feeling the homey atmosphere. And so about coming about to this topic, no doubt that MSMEs are an integral part of the economy with a major chunk of GDP. This is a contribution. For improving the ease of business, ease of doing this business for MSMEs, the government has from time to time incentivized the sector by way of granting loans to CGT MSMEs loan covers. So this way the government is ensuring infusion of capital to the sector. So CORA is also mandated the companies to disclose their MSME exposure separately with the principal and interest amount due. So with the Champions portal launched this July, which enhanced the ease of registering the MSMEs, and many firms opting the same, the burden of disclosure for the buyer of entity also increases. So our speaker today probably covering all the topics because no, the disclosure wise and other compliances and all, the MSMEs has to complain with the ROC ROC compliances. So I hope our speaker of today will be covering and enlightening us on the said topic. With this, I conclude and I wish all the members happy learning experience.
Thank you very much, madam. And this is the time for me to introduce a speaker. Thanks to Facebook, probably I didn't speak directly with Madam Speaker Rima Jain, Madam, but we are more than 3-4 years Facebook friends. So thanks to Facebook for connecting us. Apart from that, very known versatile personality speaker, Madam Rima Jain is a company secretary, partner in Dugan Advisory LLP, fellow members of Institute of Company Secretaries of India, accounting technician from Institute of Chartered Accountants of India, and she is a law graduate, diploma in internal audit from Institute of Company Secretaries of India, MCOM with major in business policy and corporate governance, bachelor's in English literature from Delhi University. CS Rima Jain is working in the field of corporate laws and secretarial compliance, having a vast experience, more than 8 years, professional career span of 8 years. She had been privileged providing service to the clients of a wide range of industry sector globally. She is one of the board for listed and public unlisted companies as independent director. She is having experience of advisory, representing, handling matters at NCLT, witnessed half an hour, 1 hour back also. She is at NCLT hearing, I know that. And NCLAT also, contract management and negotiate. She has been imperative part of the implementation of the corporate governance system of IFC system at various organizations. She has hands-on experience in bank audits, SOX compliance, and internal auditors. And she also has impart training to the CA and CPE hours programs, conference, and chartered accountancy students organized by the ICAI. She is a well-known regular visiting faculty at ICAI at Delhi and live virtual classes by ICA. So big list is there. So I don't want to waste much of the time, which I straight away I request Madam C. Company Secretary Rima Jain to take over and enlighten us for related to ROC related compliance for the especially MSME small related companies. Over to Speaker Rima Jain, Madam.
Thank you so much, Hemant ji, for the introduction. And I would also acknowledge the presence of Treasurer SIRC, Mrs. Geeta A.V. from Bengaluru. I hope I'm correct when I talk about where you're located right now. Well, I also know someone here who's been very much through and through a part of corporate governance, which we look on as directors in a company. Mr. Bashikar Matapalli, who also happens to be the deputy convener.
Yeah, you know that our deputy convener is very good close friend and colleague for your.
Absolutely. So deputy convener, so when I talk about hands-on experience on certain issues, we collectively have been a part of certain such experiences. I acknowledge this presence as well.
Low. Can you volume a little bit low? Can you?
I'll put the mic right here. I hope I'm audible now.
But now it's better.
Now it's better. I'll hold my mic right here.
Yeah, that's better.
So now, when we have a particular topic which deals with when we say compliances in respect to MSME companies. Now, when I talk about MSME companies, there was earlier the system when they used to talk that, okay, we will talk about MSME classification based on only investment. But times changed. This year, somewhere the government realized that the long pending change in respect of the criteria or the threshold from, say, investment needs to be changed to investment and turnover altogether. And this change came up with the revised MSME classification this year. Now, the revised MSME classification, where the micro, small, or medium talks in terms of investments, talks in terms of turnover. Investment, however, does not matter to us when we talk about, say, companies, because companies here, generally we look in the form of compliances based on public, private, small company, OPC company, or listed companies. Secondly, if we talk about, when we talk about compliances, we may talk about compliances on the basis of threshold limits in terms of turnover, threshold limits in the terms of borrowing permits, threshold limits in terms of, say, loans, deposits, borrowings outstanding, then threshold limits based on the basis of capital that the company has, paid up share capital, or maybe paid up basis of paid up share capital, free reserves. On several of these categorizations, we can understand, or maybe we can identify that what particular compliance is applicable in a company. So the compliances that now I would be dealing with right now, I have, though I focus this particular presentation for MSMEs, so generally we do not have listed companies falling within the purview of MSMEs. So that is not what I'm talking about. I would be limiting this to public limited, private limited companies first, and the additional compliances that are applicable for public limited. Private followed by additional compliances for public. Now at this juncture, what you need to remember is, obviously, your officers, your good officers have been regularly involved for all compliances of this sort. But at this juncture, when we are here in a situation in India where, because of the novel coronavirus, which is also known as COVID-19, due dates have been shifted tremendously. Like in the initial, when the lockdown came, April, we had the notifications, March end to April, we had the notifications that these particular relaxations are applicable in the month of June. Then they said September, then finally came December. So automatically, when the government is almost shifting, when we talk about a paradigm shift from, say, one law to another, today we have a paradigm shift which is coming from 3 months to the next 3 months and to the next 3 months, and maybe extendable to the next 3 months as well, depending on the situation. And why is it impacting us as professionals, and why we need to still constantly remind us ourselves? The reason being that we are traveling in a situation where we are auditing 2019-20, and we are gearing up for 2020-21. So at this point, we have to look at what compliances are applicable and what were complied last year, and what compliances are applicable and need to be complied for next year. Now, since we are focusing here on MSMEs first, as the particular session has been christened, so let me first talk about what is the revised definition of MSMEs. Now, the revised definition of MSMEs today, when I talk about for the purpose of classification of a micro industry, would be for manufacturing and services together. Now, earlier we had manufacturing separate criteria, services separate criteria. So today, manufacturing and services industry together will fall under the micro industry if the investment is less than ₹1 crore and the turnover is less than ₹5 crores. That is where you talk about the micro industry. Next comes the small industry. Since it is MSME, so micro, small. Investment less than 10 CR, so more than one and more than one to 10 CR, and turnover is less than 50 crores. And whatever falls the rest shall be your medium industry or medium enterprise, as the term itself says, MSME. Now, though we are here talking about these threshold criteria, so these threshold criteria are separately identified under the Companies Act. This is not on the basis of, say, a company is a public enterprise or a private enterprise, or a public company or a private company, if I talk in terms of Companies Act. So here we need to first identify, okay, these particular compliances are applicable in company. What additional is applicable basis these particular compliances? Say, for example, if I talk about a 100 crore company where the turnover is 100 CR or more, you would definitely have appointment of independent directors happening. You would definitely have CSR activities happening. A woman director in case of such public limited companies where the turnover is crossing the threshold. So those kind of compliances are those which we will have to additionally look and take care of. So very quickly, I would start with my presentation first. Hemant ji, I would state host has disabled participant screen sharing. So in case if,
now you can go ahead, madam. I'm sorry. Because
okay, I'll reconnect for that. Now, this is what the chartered accountant's perspective also is. Now, when I say anything again, I am not specifically against the chartered accountants community. Let me state here, my husband is himself a practicing chartered accountant. If I say something, it is totally out of experience here and not because of you all. Now, first of all, when we talk about a private company, we talk about Section 2, Clause 68. Section 2, Clause 68 defines the term private company as a company in which its articles is stated that this is a private company, point number one. Second, transfer of shares is restricted. You cannot transfer shares from one person to another freely. It has to first go inter se within the promoters of the company or the members of the company. Second, limits the number of its members to 200. Earlier act it was 50. Subsequently, in Companies Act 2013, initially it was 50. Then 5th of June 2015 came an amendment and it made it to 200. Third, prohibits an invitation to the public to subscribe for any shares of the company. So here, since you're not inviting to the public, you're not becoming a public shareholding company, and therefore you are a private company. Some specific features, of course, many a times, though we'll all say that, okay, this amendment, these bit of amendments came, say, in the month of June 2015 or June 2017, because it was first was 5th June 2015, second came 13th of June 2017, and subsequently a lot of notifications, circulars, orders, or maybe a few more amendment acts as well. So these have already come in, but these kind of questions keep popping into you as well and to me as well. So these are some things which definitely are required as a reminder to us. First being that there is no minimum capital requirement. People still give a call and ask, madam, एक ना client ने company incorporate करना था. वो company incorporate करने के लिए अपन लोग को private company है. Can we have a share capital of 1 lakh rupees minimum? Is it as per law? So sometimes obviously these kind of questions do pop up. So there is no minimum capital requirement. Let's remind ourselves that we are out of the 1956 era. 2013 का 5th June 2015 तक का भी era जा चुका है. No minimum capital requirement neither for public company nor for private company. So both of them, the 1 lakh, 5 lakh threshold is already gone away or dispensed away by the government. Second, for the purpose of acceptance of deposits for private companies, you do not have the requirement of the offer document, the circular, to be like circulated, to be deposited with the ROC. You can easily accept deposits subject to 100% of the aggregate of paid up share capital and free reserves. Securities premium is not to be included for that purpose. Then deposit repayment reserve, which was earlier required, is not required to be maintained. Now here, let me also talk about a COVID-19 amendment. Initially, the government, when it came up with certain amendments in light of COVID or relaxations in light of COVID, they said, okay, this is not required till, say, when you talk about 30th of June. Initially, they made it 30th of April, then they came up 30th of June, then they further extended and they said, okay, to 30th of September, and so on and so forth. This creation of deposit repayment reserve, the 15% criteria or threshold, is not required as of now. So you can dispense away with that. Or in case where it is required, you can do it with staggered time period because they've given a time period based relaxation. Then for private companies, resolutions which are mentioned under section 179 section 3, you do not need to file those resolutions anymore. Let me give you an example. Just like for public companies, we have resolutions, say for approval of financial statements and director's report. You need to file that particular resolution with the ROC in form number FGT 14. But if we talk about a private company, prior to June 2015, this particular resolution was required to be filed for the private companies also. But subsequent to June 2015, there came a change, there came an era where they said, okay, now this is not required to be filed for private limited companies, only public limited companies need to file this particular resolution for approval of financial statements and directors' report by the board of the company. Third, loans to directors is allowed, obviously subject to certain conditions which have been laid down. Then earlier there was a requirement that in case if you are related person, say there is a resolution relating to my appointment in a particular general meeting of a company, then my relative should not vote. Why? Because the relative becomes an interested party. But subsequently, June 2015, there came an amendment and said that, okay, this related member can also vote in a resolution where he is interested. And section 108, disclosure of interests से related party से related आपका चला जाता है. So ऐसे particular resolutions के अंदर a related member can also vote subsequently. Now, when I also talk about this, loans to companies also was allowed for private limited companies because that is also the basic ways out of which a company can raise more finance, raise more share capital, and that is how they can survive. So those are some specific features, some specific amendments, which definitely come to us on a daily basis when we deal with our clients, when we deal with say other professional peer members also. Now I'll talk about certain major changes first, and then I will talk about what are the compliances. Maybe in the how I have devised it is in the form like what is mandatory for quarter 1, what is mandatory for quarter 2, what is mandatory for quarter 3, and quarter 4 would be something that is specific for the year throughout. So first, the major changes. So that director's report, if I say, then every year we definitely see a few more changes popping up. Say there was an amendment recently where they said that an abridged format of director's report can be adopted for the private companies, which are small companies. Now, if it's a small company, obviously it is an MSME company because we have a 50 lakh capital and a 2 crore of your turnover criteria. So if that is the case, then of course your company comes within the ambit of a small company. It also comes in the ambit of a micro company also. So when it comes within the ambit of a micro company, provided the investment criteria is also satisfied, so at that point of time, the company may adopt an abridged format of your share capital. And this abridged format generally does not say that, okay, you have to put the complete MGT9. No, the complete MGT9 may not be put up, provided there's a website of the company and you are putting a copy of the annual return of the company in that particular link. So when I talk about this, many people say that, okay, you are saying that, okay, the company need not put the MGT9 here, and what the company can do is it can go ahead and say, put the URL or the link in the annual report and say, okay, this link is put, so my company need not put the annual return along. Now, the practical difficulty which people face is, I have my AGM first. In the director's report, I have to put as an extract MGT9. Now, this director's report is circulated along with the annual report, which goes to my members or which goes to my shareholders for the purpose of the AGM. This is a part of that circulation pack to my members. Now, once the AGM happens, only after that I will have my annual return put up on the website link, because annual return shall be filed within 60 days from the conclusion of the AGM. So if my AGM has taken place on 30th of September, so 29th of October, 29th of November, effectively I can say maximum file my MGT7 form. So only after that I can put it on the website. Now what do? I will have to update data which has gone. I will have to put that particular link in my director's report in respect of annual return of the company, that on what URL it is placed. So people say, how do we manage that? What we can advise to our clients is that, say if my company's URL is xyz.com or xyz, since we're in India, say .co.in, we can place a sub URL or a subdomain or a sub page on that particular website, which can be xyz.co.in / annual secretarial, maybe, or maybe the word corporate governance can be used. Now, when you have these particular words, you can put the word as 2019, 2020. Then on this particular page, this is the link you can give in the annual report, that, okay, subsequent to the annual general meeting of the company, the annual return of the company shall be uploaded on this particular link, which is specific for the corporate governance section of the year 2019-20. So you have not come into a situation, not landed into a place where you say there is non-compliance committed in respect of the company's annual compliance. So xyz.co.in / corporate governance / 2019-20 could be an alternative where you can easily say, okay, subsequent to the AGM, I will upload my annual return here, and give this URL in the director's report of the company, which is to be circulated to the members of the company. In that ways, you will be compliant of law and you need not worry about the fact that there is any element of non-compliance which has taken place in respect of this particular company. Next, annual return, a very, very, very lengthy form. And now, despite being a CS, when I'm saying it that it's a very lengthy form, probably your understanding on this particular form would be equally grave. Why? Because generally, if we talk about public limited companies or private limited companies, what happens? Our clients come to us, they say, okay, we want to have a resolution for the bank. This is the resolution. This resolution has to be printed. Secretarial standards have to be complied. They give that particular resolution to the bank, signed copy, and they say, okay, it's done. At the end of the year, we are asking them, okay, what resolutions were passed? Or they pass the resolutions at their end and they come to us at the end that, okay, this all was done. So we have to go through each and every documentation more carefully now, because when we talk about any of these forms, in the end, while we are certifying, there is a requirement, there is a asterisk, if I say, caveat which says section 447, section 448, wherein if there is any if there is any wrongful certification, or if at all there is any wrong data, wrong piece of information, or omission, there would be section 447, 448 running behind the person who has certified the form. And who would that particular person be? In case of any of these forms, I would not specifically say MGT7, but any of these forms, it would be we professionals. And we professionals would be sitting at the back stating, okay, now we will have to be prepared. And therefore, because of that section 447, 448, which is there as a inherent part of Companies Act 2013, which keeps haunting us day and night, we have to get into the habit of telling our clients that when you are undertaking any of this act, when you are in the interest of passing any particular resolution for your company and for the conduct of business of your company, you will have to first update the professionals that you have to undertake that particular transaction. You have to pass that particular resolution. Pass it not just from the perspective of stating that, okay, this is the resolution, but also take care that secretarial standards are being complied.
March.
I think someone's mic is turned on. So can I just request that mic to be turned off for a minute, please? Hemantji, I think it's your mic. Can I please request you to mute it for some time, please?
I'm sorry. Okay.
Now, when we are talking to our clients, I would again come back to that fact. Secretarial standards are required. So I'm talking about minutes also here. I'm talking about annual return also. Why I'm talking about it collectively is because we have to file that, okay, what were the dates of the board meetings of the company? What were the dates of the, what was the date of the annual general meeting of the company? What were the dates of the, say, extraordinary general meeting of the company? If you don't have those dates, how can you file the current data? You cannot really take that particular interest, obtain that every time you are filing an MGT7, you do first an inspection of what forms were filed in the current year. You cannot assume on what particular dates your particular company has given any resolution to any bank or any authority. So, given that kind of a situation, you will have to first get that particular streak in your client that they will have to consult you before going ahead with that particular process of issuing a resolution to any particular authority. Now, once that is the situation, your clients will get into the habit of telling you beforehand, and therefore they will get into the habit of letting you be aware so that every second requirement does not make you land up into another suit. So maybe when I again talk about MGT7, this was one that, okay, you need to have your board meeting GM dates. Then share transfer details. Recently, there was an amendment in respect of PAS 6, which is applicable on private companies, Rule 9A, which is not applicable on on private companies, but it is applicable only on public companies. Well, now what is to be happening this year? When we are filing this particular MGT 7, if any of the companies, they have already had this transition from, say, normal physical shares to dematerialized form of shares, you will have to verify their shareholding from the respective account statements of demat account of that particular company. When it comes from the depository, say obviously for the demat system, also the company would have to engage a depository for this particular process. So what will happen? This depository needs to come into picture. When this depository is in picture, the depository will give the BENPOS data. It's known as the BENPOS data. So the BENPOS data would then help you in analyzing that what is the percentage of shareholding of the company which is dematerialized, how many transfers have happened in respect of those particular shares, what is the percentage of shareholding change of the promoters, what is the percentage of shareholding change of non-promoters, and this particular data also needs to go to the MGT 7. Now this is something new which would happen this year as compared to every year when you would have had that, okay, this is my private companies, these are my public companies, and okay, I see my membership data, I see my share transfer form, and that's complete for me. So this particular change is going to come in respect of MGT 7 again. So obviously, with every particular step that you have to take in any particular form, in respect of the changes that may have happened in the year, the form becomes even more lengthy, even more complex. And for the first time that we do it every year, we've all had it. Why? Because the client needs to be educated first. Now, quickly, I'll go through that. What companies are exempted from signing of annual return by company secretary, and what is the certification criteria? So, if you have all, if the company is a listed company, the company is a company which has its paid up share capital of 10 crore rupees or more, or turnover of 50 crore rupees or more, then you have to have your annual return certified in the form of an MGT8. Now, MGT8 is an extra requirement. There's a specific format which needs to be, say, something like on the lines of statutory audit when you do it in terms of the financial statements of the company. Similarly, here in terms of secretarial compliances, you will have to have an annual return certification in the MGT8 where the compliances of the company, of the corporate laws that are applicable in the company, shall be done by a practicing company secretary. Second, annual return shall have to be signed by a practicing company secretary, except for a one-person company or a small company. So if I am in the category of a small or a medium company, then I'm not falling within the ambit of a small company here. I may be a small company, I may be a medium, small enterprise, I may be a medium enterprise from the MSME definition, but I'm not a small company here because of the criteria there. So I am not exempted. I need to be a small company here. I need small. So there's a difference between small company versus small enterprise as per MSMED Act as amended. Next, secretarial standards are applicable on all companies. Now, when we talk about secretarial standards, which are the major ones that we should take care of? Though all are applicable, it comes from section 118, section 10, and 118 subsection 10 gives the powers to the ICSI to frame the secretarial standards which shall be applicable in all companies. Now, since it says all companies, and therefore all secretarial standards are applicable in all companies in all situations. One, we have one on a board meeting, we have another on annual general meeting, we have another one on dividends. Then there recently came another one on related party transactions. So these particular secretarial standards are applicable in all the companies. Now, when I talk about board meetings, it specifically says that the board meeting, for the board meeting, you should have a minimum notice period of 7 days. And a shorter notice has to be first unanimously approved by all the board members. Similarly, for AGM, 21 days clear notice is required. If you have a shorter notice, at least 95% of the members of the company should have consented prior to the AGM in respect of the shorter notice. Otherwise, the AGM cannot take place. Then, if we talk about the AGM again, there was a requirement which came from the secretarial standards that you should have the proxy form attached to the notice, you should have the attendance slip attached to the notice, you should have the route map which can take you down to the venue of the company, the venue of the AGM or the general meeting. If I say, because the EGM would also, you'll have to follow this particular standard. So this route map was also required. Now here, when I talk about this route map context, we are right now sitting in a situation where many companies would have conducted virtual annual general meetings. Now, if I talk about this virtual annual general meeting, I would also have to take into account that at this particular juncture, the relaxation which came from the government itself, that there would be no specific venue of the meeting, since you cannot say that, okay, my ex-director is sitting in Delhi, so this is my venue of the meeting, or my Y director is coming from Chennai, so that will be the place of the meeting. My Z is the registered office of the company, but the office of the company, or the officer in default of the company, is situated from there or attending the meeting from there, so that will be the venue of the company. This COVID-19 relaxation said there would be no venue of the meeting, even if you like go through any of the company's notice of the general meetings for this year, which have happened virtually. They would not have talked about the venue of the meeting. Had it been any other year, I would have personally stated that there is a disqualification on non-compliance in respect of secretarial standards, since the venue of the meeting has not been stated, the route map has not been given. But this year, if my meeting is on Cisco WebEx, I will not give a route map guiding to Cisco WebEx, or I'll not give a route map guiding to Zoom, but I will give details of how to attend that particular meeting. So in that mannerism, since there is no venue of the meeting, there is no guidance to the venue of the meeting required, and therefore I can skip things. I can skip stating the venue of the meeting, and I can skip stating the route, giving along the route map. Third, there was though there is a mandatory requirement to give the proxy form as per secretarial standard. But this year, the COVID-19 relaxation said that if you're conducting a virtual meeting, no proxies can attend. As a proxy cannot attend, therefore there is no requirement of giving a proxy form as well. So even if the proxy form this year was not attached to the notice, since many of you would be auditing listed companies as well. So if you're auditing a listed company, there would be a corporate governance audit involved as well. And that corporate governance audit, if you're not finding a copy of the proxy form for this particular year, if you're not finding a copy of the route map for this particular year, then it is not non-compliance. So my friends, these are those specific points which definitely come to our eye when we are talking about, say, board meetings or annual general meetings or extraordinary general meetings, and these are those which are important. These are those areas which the government also picks up when they talk about non-compliance per se. Like, say, for example, initially when CSR came up in the year 2013, since it was, I think, one of the first provisions to be enforced as well in the month of September. September 13, 2013 as well, I think was September 12th or September 13, 2013 was the date when CSR provisions came into force. Since there was no specific penalty at that point of time, no one would have really thought that the government would start initiating notices in the next 2 to 3 years on this. But it did happen. In the next 3 years, notices came. Today, the government has already started considering that what companies are not complying secretarial standards. They've already started having a task force, internal task force. They've started hiring professionals as a part of that particular task force, just like it did for CSR. Similarly, for this particular mannerism, to check through that what companies are, say, uploading resolutions which are not compliant, what companies are not following the mandatory compliance. So again, notices have started flowing. There was an era where they said, okay, this was only for managerial remuneration. People have started receiving notices that section 197 is not complied, or maybe company secretary is not appointed. Section 203, there's a non-compliance, something of that sort. But today the era has changed. So when you talk about a public company, when you talk about a private company, which is MSME, or when you talk about a non-MSME entity also, these secretarial standards today have a lot of relevance. I talk about annual compliances for private companies. As I talk about annual compliances for private companies, I had stated I would take up these in the form of quarter 1, quarter 2, quarter 3, and through the year compliance. So the first being MBP 1. Now, when I talk about MBP 1, the first thing that comes to our mind is, okay, this is a disclosure. This disclosure has to come in the very first meeting with the board of directors every year, that, okay, these are the companies where I have an interest. These are the companies where I'm connected. These are the companies where I have shareholding. These are the companies where I'm a key managerial personnel. And I need to disclose this in the first board meeting of the company every year. Or in the next meeting, say if I have been in the middle of year appointed as a particular director in a particular company, then I have to inform the other companies in the very subsequent meeting of that particular company. Now, what also comes is, sometimes people ask, ye MBP1 file kahan karna hai? Because generally, when we talk about ROC compliance, what comes to mind is, okay, whenever we are talking about a resolution, whenever we are talking about a document, whenever we are getting it signed from the client, we have to file it with the ROC. There is no requirement of filing MBP1 with the ROC. The board has to take note of the MBP1 which has been obtained from the board of directors, and that has to form part of the minutes of the particular company for that specific meeting. And that specific meeting is the first meeting of the board of directors. Now, though there was no specific relaxation in terms of section 184 section 1, but if I talk about this specific year, this year is a very special one. Why? Because when we talk about MBP1, you will have to talk about the companies conducting their first board meetings. Now, many companies, because it's a relaxation, there was, like, say, generally you have a gap of 120 days between any two board meetings. They said, okay, you take 60 days extra this year. When you take 60 days extra this year, many companies would not have obtained the first MBP ones also in the first year, in the first board meeting. Why? Because they were already enjoying the relaxation period. And when this relaxation period was being taken care of, many people were not going to offices, many companies were functioning virtually, or many were not functioning at all at the time of the lockdown practically. So these companies which did not obtain the MBP1 in the first board meeting, they can always in the next board meeting take a note that in light of the COVID, since the company was in a lockdown and business was being conducted virtually or not being conducted at all, so therefore the MBP1 has been officially received and taken note of in this subsequent meeting of the company. Now, obviously, this is a novel virus, a novel kind of a situation for India and for the world. Least chances for any non-compliance being considered in this light. Second, receipt of DIR 8. The director has to disclose that there is no disqualification at his end. He is not disqualified by any virtue. Now, when I talk about this, let me remind you all of the year 2017. So 2017, what happened? 2017, the government or the MCA specifically came out with a list and it said, okay, these directors are disqualified because of non-filing with this particular companies. Now, this was at the end of the directors. This was the prerogative of the companies to obtain a DIR 8. DIR 8 was not obtained. They never checked. If I talk about small companies, if I talk about MSME companies, I'm not talking about the listed companies because they are proactive in obtaining all of these documents. Now, when I talk about these MSMEs, many had not obtained. When I talk about these MSMEs, many directors had also not given on their own volition. Third, auditors also did not note in their audit report where they had to state that none of the directors of the company are disqualified. They did not note any disqualification for those respective years in the financial statements of the company. So there was a certain lapse in the end of the auditors. I would not only say statutory auditors, I would also say about the secretarial auditors also, because it is also the prerogative of the secretarial auditors to state the directors are not disqualified within MGT 7 or MGT 8 as applicable. So MGT 8, wherever it is applicable, there would be a specific statement. MGT 7, otherwise in the comment section, we can always state that, okay, the directors of the company are disqualified. But no such observation was either made by the secretarial auditors nor by the stat auditors of the company, that is the statutory auditors of the company, in any of the previous audit reports. So this receipt of DIR rate now deserves more attention, because next what will happen is, though there would always be a say tussle between the bar and the bench, people would go appeal. Like just now, if you say when you talk about the disqualification list, there was an order by the Bombay High Court which was subsidized before the Supreme Court right now. Similarly, there were certain orders which were passed by the Madras Bar, which are again subsidized before the Supreme Court. So those kind of cases would definitely happen. But the fact is, we professionals at our end will have to take care that our clients are compliant to these. And please remember, I'm more specifically talking of MSME companies, because those are run in a completely different manner when we talk about running these companies on a practical note. And they do not function practically. They function as the business owner wants it to. We complete the compliance. Let me state that. Now, what we've done is, if I give it as a piece of suggestion, every 1 month, my team from my office connects with the clients, their offices, tells them that, okay, we are going to conduct one particular board meeting of your company for this month. If there is anything that has to happen in the next month, please plan it well in advance, please tell it. We will share you the complete notice, pass those resolutions now and use it whenever you want to. Send a certified copy, extract of those particular resolutions to the required authority. And generally, if something has been happening over years, even the directors would have come into the mannerism of knowing that, okay, this is the first month of the year, or this is the second month of the financial year. So this is bound to happen. So they would give you those extra piece of advice or piece of notings that, okay, this has to go for the board meeting of the company, or the approval, or this particular authority would call for this particular resolution. Second, we need to educate them that it is not always required that you have a resolution passed by board meeting. Today, in this particular situation, when we have virtual meetings going on, certain transactions which are open otherwise for circular resolutions can also be passed as circular resolutions. You may otherwise opt not to have a virtual meeting also for certain transactions. So our MSME companies, our small companies, they can be educated that not every time that you want to pass a resolution to be given to a bank, not every time when you have to pass a resolution to give, say, for application before certain authorities, you can pass those resolutions by circulation and write it that that particular resolution has been passed by circulation. It's just that you need to mark it to the board of directors of the company, and they need to revert back stating the same resolution has been approved in the mannerism as it has been sent, or say reply back with the word as accepted or not accepted or not approved. So that ways you are easy on the perspective of compliance of that particular MSME. Third, half yearly return MSME 1. Now, when I talk about this half yearly return of MSME 1, my friend, what comes to my mind immediately is that why do you really need to file this form? See, when I talk about the MSME mandate, it says that, okay, beyond 45 days, you cannot withhold the payment of an MSME. Or if payments are withheld or not made or not cleared, or they are outstanding for a period of more than 45 days, then these grievances can be raised to the MSME Samadhan Board. Now, when this is happening, they say, okay, you will have to first inform that, okay, these particular MSMEs have not been paid for 45 days or more. So though they are casting one side the responsibility or the onus on the person who is due to receive payment, they are also casting a responsibility. MSME Samadhan says, okay, you have to inform me if you've not received a payment for 45 days or more. But ROC here comes and says that you are a company, you had to make a payment to an MSME vendor. If you have not made that particular payment for more than 45 days, you have to inform me at the end of the particular 6 months time period, or at the end of that half year, that this particular payment to an MSME vendor is pending at the end of the half year. So this can also be verified. Now, here, certain times what I have heard from people, or when I say these people are both professionals, clients, general public at different programs, probably. So what they say is, okay, we put a particular invoice in our record as and when we put it in our accounting base. So if it is received to me today, I will not say it is received to me today in accounts. I will put it the day I insert it or I make the entry in the accounting software. I will say I received it by that particular day, and then I will clear the payment on that particular day. So I do not say it is more than 45 days if it's still lying on my table. But that is not the mannerism, and the client needs to be told that it is not as per how you do or how it pleases to you. It is about that 45 days from the date of receipt of the invoice. Or somewhere you should probably get them to get into an ideology where they talk about the GST regime. That okay, service is completed, invoice is received. If 30 days is not met, then whatever date is earlier, that particular categorization, and then probably they'll have to get to that particular regime that today if I have received it, I will have to make a payment since this is an MSME vendor, because the MSME vendor from the date of his, say, if I've sent it to you by speed post, if it has reached to you in 3 days, so once it has reached in your office, that person will take it 45 days from that particular date. Or else the MSME Samadhan portal would be at the rescue of that particular MSME vendor. So here, this is another compliance which has to be complied. Now, when I talk about this MSME form, there is no additional fees for this particular form. And therefore, our clients do not fear a late filing. Who fears the late filing? We professionals. We will have to tell them, we will have to guide them that there could be a further action by the government at any point of time, because it is the government's prerogative on when they start with any particular action basis any particular provisions of the Companies Act. So they will have to go for speedy compliance or timely compliance of the provisions of law. Next, DPT3. Now this is an annual form, I will say. Why? Because when we are filing this particular form, say if I'm filing this particular form on 30th of June, I would be talking to the financial data for the year 2019-20, 31st March. I will be calculating the net worth of the company from there. I will be calculating the turnover of the company from there, which has to be inserted in the DPT3 form. Then I would have to talk about the deposits of the company as on 31st March for the financial year 2019-20, and I will have to accordingly decide if there are deposits of the company, deposits in the company, if there are no deposits in the company, if there are transactions which are not to be treated as deposits, if they're exempted deposits. So again, this is an annual document which goes in respect of the previous financial year, which is just last ended, and it has to go by 30th of June, right now extended up to 31st of December. What comes next? Preparation and approval of financial statements. Now, when I talk about preparation and approval of these financial statements, then what is important is that my financial statements should be as per the first Schedule 3. I've still heard many people talk about Schedule 6, revised Schedule 6, because that is the habit that we've got into. But Schedule 3 does have a lot of dissimilarities in respect of the earlier or the erstwhile Schedule 6 or revised Schedule 6, and therefore Schedule 3 needs to set into the mind from that perspective also. So, one. Second, approval of financial statements. Say if there is a private company, you would generally in a private company only have the board. The financial statements need to be approved by the board and then further off. If you talk about a public limited company, if there is a requirement to have an audit committee, then you would first get the financial statements approved by the audit committee, and then they would be recommended by the audit committee to the board of the company, and subsequently recommended to the members in the general meeting for approval. That particular mannerism of approval of financial statements shall have to be taken care while the financial statements are being approved. Second, while these approved financial statements by the board is being circulated to the members of the company, what is to be mandatorily attached is also the auditor's report and the board report. Now, when I talk about the auditor's report and the board report, these also go hand in hand. See, there would certain times be certain comments from the side of the auditor in respect of certain areas or certain aspects of the balance sheet, or certain say categorizations, groupings, if we say subsequent groupings, or how a particular transaction is, or the auditor, despite having given certain relevant information, would have made an observation, would have given an adverse finding, would have given an adverse qualification or remark, then my board has to comment on those particular aspects in the director's report. My board has the power that in case if there is any such qualification, if there is any such adverse remark, if there is any such say emphasis also on certain matters, my board has the powers that it can go ahead and explain those areas, explain those remarks which have been placed by the auditor in the director's report. They can address. Why? Because these issues, when they are addressed in the director's report and they reach the members of the company, the same stands clarified before the members. So that has to be taken care of. You cannot say that, okay, just my auditor has stated this and we have done the necessary compliance, or if I'm a listed company, I've informed the stock exchange on this particular aspect, I've had that additional annexure which is required from the perspective of a listed company, and I've filed it across. That does not mean that my prerogative or my onus is complete. I will have to further on go on and talk about in this director's report. So director's report, there are two specific things we've already talked about. One being this one on respect of director's report in respect of the auditor's comments or auditor's qualifications. Second, where we talked about the annual return of the company or the URL of the website in respect of where the annual return should be placed. So two together. Third, this audit director's report should be signed by the chairperson who's authorized by the board, or where he's not so authorized by at least two directors, out of which one should be an MD if there is one in the company. Now, we may also have come across cases. Now, here I talk about the financial statements and the director's report together, where at the time of uploading these financial statements in the AOC4, what happens is we say the file size has increased and therefore my AOC4 cannot be filed in such a situation. So in the end, what do? We go to the Word file, we resort to the Excel file, and what we do? We convert we put an SD, we convert it into PDF, we file it because the file size now is low. That is not allowed. The file which has to be, the document which has to be filed needs to be signed by the directors. It says it should be signed by the chairperson. So if I talk about section 129, read with section 134, read 136, this has to be a signed document. No SD will work now onwards. The SD format is dispensed away with. Second, we also sometimes see that we appointed somebody as chairperson for a particular meeting. Can that chairperson alone sign the director's report? The answer is a big no. The chairperson of the company can alone sign a director's report. The chairperson of a board meeting alone cannot. So it is, if there is no chairperson of the company, then no chairman of a company, then it has to be signed by at least two directors. And if there is a managing director, that managing director necessarily has to sign the financial statements and the director's report. Next, if I further talk about the financial statements, if you have an audit committee, the audit committee chairman has to sign. If you have a CS, if you have a CEO, if you have a CFO, they also have to mandatorily sign the financial statements of the company. Now, there's a question in the interim which I have received. Comes from Swaminathan ji. Okay, Mr. Swaminathan says, PO is issued to an MSME vendor stipulating credit period to 60 days from the date of the goods received note, also accepted by the vendor. Is it mandatory to make payment within 45 days? See, when I talk about the MSME form, they say if there is something specific which has been agreed to by the concerned parties, that is the receiving party and the vendor, then that is okay. But when I go to my MSME rules, MSME Act, MSME Act, they do not talk about this. They say 45 days is 45 days. If you have a specific arrangement, you should be ready to clarify the same. So maybe when you are talking about the same in your financial statements, Mr. Swaminathan, you can state it in your financial statements of that particular company. You can state it in the director's report of the company. Then, in respect of the MSME payments, there are specific arrangements with the vendors, and where there are specific arrangements, they have been paid up as per the arrangement discussed and not as per the 45 days criteria. That shall suffice. Holding of AGM. Now, holding of AGM comes under the ambit of section 96. Now, when I talk about this holding of AGM criteria, we did talk about secretarial standards. We did talk about some COVID-19 relaxations, where there were relaxations to the perspective where it was that, okay, these companies need not have a venue of a meeting if they're conducting the AGM virtually. Like if I talk about the Reliance AGM this year, of course, they had it in GeoMeet, and there was no specific venue despite the company having it on the Geo platform. So they had to state that, okay, this meeting was being conducted on this particular platform. This is how you access this particular meeting. This is how you ask your queries for this particular meeting. So what happens? Your convening of AGM this year, though it is not as per section 96, though it is not as per the allied rules, though it is not as per the secretarial standards again, but it is compliant. Now, if I talk about general section 96, this general section 96 lays down the time period for the annual general meeting itself. It shall say that, okay, every year the company has to have a general meeting, which is the annual general meeting, in addition to the other meetings of the company. Second, this general meeting has to be held within a period of 6 months from the date of closure of financial year. So my date of closure of financial year is 31st March. Within the first 6 months, if this has to happen by 30th of September. This year, what they did first was, in light of the COVID-19 relaxations, they said for the companies that have closed their financial statements on 31st of March, they can have their, the companies that have closed their financial years by 31st of December last year, they can, instead of closing their financial statements and having their annual general meeting by 30th of June, they can have their annual general meetings by 30th of September. Subsequently, they made it 31st of December for them. Similarly, for those companies which have their financial years ending by 31st of March, recently we did have the notification in the month of September, which came and said that these companies can have their annual general meetings till 3 months subsequent. Like, for example, if my last annual general meeting was last year, say 28th of September, then this year my annual general meeting shall be conducted within a period of 12 months maximum. One that comes to 27th of September, and 3 months extendable, that makes it 27th of December. So it is not a plain blanket approval up to 31st of December. It is only extendable to 3 months from the due date of the general meeting this year. So that way, again, we have to see it in light of COVID-19. If I further talk about, I talked about the proxy form need not be a part of the bunch. The attendance slip has to be a part. The route map need not be a part if it is a virtual meeting. However, if we talk about MSME companies, we talk about small companies, we talk about the family-owned companies, which is also known as Kiretsus companies, KIERETSUS. So Kiretsus companies, what happens is, these are all small businesses which are flourishing, where you have the mother, father, son, daughter. They are the owners, they are the directors, they are the management of the company. And they're anyways meeting each other every day. So the annual general meeting of such a company can, of course, being an MSME or being a small company, be conducted within the vicinity of the office, or within the residence of that particular directors also, or the members also. Since they are the common members, they're common directors, they're known to each other. So those companies may have the physical meetings, and those requirements of COVID-19 need not be taken care of. Similarly, if I talk about, say, the virtual meeting concept that came this year for general meetings. Now, what did they say? They said one thing more additionally, that if there are several members who are not known to each other, they should have a unique password to enter into that particular meeting. But if they are common people who are known to each other, say if I am sitting here at my office, and my father is the other director of the company, and he is sitting at his residence in another area of Delhi. And if we attend that particular meeting virtually, he's my father, I know him. We can have a common password. And if there are other members who are related to us, who are our relatives in that particular company, so we can have a common password. So that is also for virtual meetings if that is taken, and that is not non-compliance. Now, why am I talking about this? Because next year when you will be auditing and you say, okay, you've had a virtual meeting, do you have a recording? Do you have a transcript? Did you give a notice? Did the notice carry the details of the virtual meeting? Did you have any proxy attending? If there was a proxy in case of a virtual meeting, that is non-compliance. Okay. Then did you have a unique ID password? Did you have a common password in case of people who were known to each other? So those kind of things would be imperative for you to check or you to audit from the perspective of compliance for this particular year. So this year again, as I said in the starting, we are running parallelly in two mannerisms. We are running one in terms of audit of previous year, two of how we would be auditing this particular year, and therefore gearing up and educating our clients and of how they have to manage and how they have to function this particular year, which is a special year. Next, notice of the annual general meeting. Now, there are a few changes, of course, but notice of the annual general meeting also has to be as per section 101. It has to be as per Secretarial Standard 2, which is specifically on general meetings. So here, like, notice has to be given 21 days in advance. Notice has to be signed by the board of any director who's authorized, or by the company secretary of the company, or any other officer of the company which is so authorized by the board. Then notice of the general meeting should state ordinary business, should state special business, should have the explanatory statement wherever required. So all of that has to be taken care of, irrespective of the fact whether it is a micro company, whether it's a small enterprise, whether it's a medium enterprise, whether it's a small company, whether it's not a small company, whether it is private, public, or a listed entity. The only change comes in the case of a one-person company, and a one-person company definitely would be falling within MSME category only. Now, what does the small company have to do? This small company, you have one member only. You can have multiple directors, but you have only one member. So whenever that one member who's also a director, he signs the financial statements, it is deemed to have been approved. The annual general meeting deems to have been conducted, and thereafter you can go ahead and file your financial statements. Now let me quickly have a rush through in case if there are any further queries pertaining to what we've just discussed. So far, no further queries apart from the one from Mr. Swaminathan, which was addressed. So I move forward for the Q2 compliances. Now, when we talk about the Q2 compliances, so we've had the notice of the general meeting, which has been discussed. Now, this notice needs to be dispatched. It has to be dispatched to the directors, it has to be dispatched to the members, auditors, the bench of trustees. It has to be dispatched to, say, if you have, when I'm talking about auditors, I talk about the statutory auditor, I talk about the secretarial auditor, I talk about the internal auditor. Or in case if there are any other auditors also appointed in respect to that particular company. Then if there's a government company, you will have to send a notice to the government also. That, okay, this particular general meeting has been happening. So that way notice has to be dispatched. Now, in the year 2011 initially, there was a green initiative system which started on the side of the government. What they said was that the companies who have the email IDs of that particular members. Now, if it's a listed company, of course, you can have the email IDs received from the data which is maintained by the depository. So when there's a member who has a depository account, a DP account, and he would be updating his details with the DMAT account or the depository which has his DMAT account, they would have the email ID captured. So my companies can obtain the DMAT account, email account which is stated with that DMAT account, and accordingly send the notices there. Or alternatively, for other members, they can send across a specific form, receive the email IDs of those particular members, and send them the notices of those meetings or other documents pertaining to the company electronically. Similar lines, they had another circular which came in the same year in May 2011 again, which stated that companies can opt for video conferencing annual general meetings and video conferencing based board meetings also, provided you will have to conduct physically and give the others an option of attending virtually. So when this year it came, it was not the first time ever that the government has come up with this particular initiative. Unlike earlier that it was stated that okay, this year government is coming up with virtual meetings, or this year the government is coming up with everything going live, virtual, and online. So this was initially in 2011, prior to the Companies Act 2013, that this first happened. Now, this year when it is coming, or this year when it has already taken place for the purpose of audit as well for you guys, for those companies which have already conducted all of this, my directors can receive these documents on email. My directors can receive it in hard copy. Then my members should have received the notice. Now, if there are small companies, say, again, the same concept of company for Kiratsis or a family owned, what will happen? I have the mother, I have the father, I have the sister, and I have the brother. These four form part of the company. They are the directors, they are the owners. Now, they're the directors and they are the owners, that is the members of the company. Generally, what happens? The father is running the show. The others are given their names. What would the father say? Okay, I'll get this financial statement signed. It is always preferable to maintain a register when you take a receiving from them that okay, they have received the documents pertaining to the financial statements, or they have received the notice of the general meeting, they have received the notice of the board meeting, so that in terms of corporate governance, they are compliant companies. Similar is the case to auditors. Before I talk on this, I think I'll first need to ask a question to all of you. You're all auditors, right? And you all have clients which would have conducted their general meetings. As of now, some of them may still conduct their general meetings in the times to come before December closes. How many of you have attended the general meetings of your clients this year? There's a quick question to all of you. How many of you have attended the general meetings of the client companies this year? I'm awaiting the response in the chat portal.
Yes,
See, why I'm asking this particular question also has a specific relevance, and that it only be subsequent to your responses on this particular question that it becomes more imperative for me to discuss that particular point subsequently. So how many of you have attended the annual general meetings of your client companies this year? And if not, then what method did you adopt, or what steps did you undertake if you did not attend? I'll repeat. 1, did you attend? 2, what are the steps did you take if you did not attend?
Hope still not.
Still not conducted AGMs? Okay, is it for all of you? Because I do know a few people who would have attended general meetings already, or would have opted to not attend. But Bashikar-ji, let me not discuss this with you because we've already had a brief discussion on this. But I think the other members of the same community, chartered accountant fraternity, would have definitely have had received notices from their clients. Or if I say inform the client, that notice needs to be sent to them as well.
Invariably in MSME cases, auditor also auditor will prepare the notice and send.
Absolutely, that's what I said in the end, that informing the client that okay, we also received the notice.
Correct. So
Right.
hope no one has received the notices. So kindly guide us what precaution we had to take.
So, sir, when we are talking about that, okay, there is a specific agreement from all of you that okay, for the MSME clients, we prepare the notice, we send it to the client signs it, we upload along with the AOC4 as a part of good corporate governance process. I hope you all agree. And when you all agree on this, you forget to sign in respect of receipt of notice yourself. You sometimes say, okay, general meeting is happening, I did not attend, but there is a mandatory requirement under the act that the statutory auditor of the company has to attend the general meeting of the company, or else he will have to depute somebody who is capable of being auditor or competent to be an auditor to attend it on his behalf. And that person should be from his firm. Now, in case if that is not happening, My friends, my seniors, what is required is that you please send and request for leave of absence. Let that leave of absence be recorded in the minutes of the annual general meeting, because in the previous era, what was happening was, okay, one of my client company maybe would be nearby Nungambakam in Chennai, the other would be Annanagar, the third would be T Nagar, so another would be Agambakam maybe. Now, I know a few places, of course, in Chennai. So let me talk about these 4 places. If my client company is situated in these 4 places, and if I have to travel from all these 4 places for meetings which are scheduled at half an hour's difference, I will not be able to attend. And if I'm not able to attend, I will have to request for leave of absence, and that leave of absence has to be recorded. But today times have changed. If companies are holding their meetings virtually and I'm not attending, I should have a leave of absence again stated in the recording of that particular general meeting, or else a formal letter, a formal email going to that particular company that I am precluded from attending the meeting because of certain other occupation. If that is not required, that is not recorded, that is non-compliance. Today, since again times have changed, you would be in a situation that, okay, 10:30 I'm logging in from one meeting, I'm logging out at 10:45, I'm logging it at 10:50, I'm logging in at another meeting, 11 o'clock I'm logging out from that. So that is easily possible, easily convenient. Now I don't have to travel distances. Now I have to just travel with the meeting numbers and meeting passwords. So the times and the era has changed, and therefore I need to be prudent enough that though earlier, despite a leave of absence, I could have stated that, okay, I was held up in traffic. But this year, if any of your client goes and opts for a virtual meeting, and if you're not present, you cannot say that I was held up in traffic. You may probably beforehand send across emails to your clients stating that you are preoccupied on the said date because of ongoing compliance time period, and therefore you will not be able to attend the said general meeting. One simple email and safeguards you as an auditor. And of course, government also understands that right now compliance is being there is being a paradigm shift from months to months. So they would not really cast any kind of a spell on you for that particular non-compliance, or by virtue of seeking a leave of absence for all companies as well. Now, why I'm specifically talking about this again is because if you remember, last year have been really taxing on auditors when I talk about, say, resignation of auditors specifically. So if an auditor is resigned, auditor says preoccupation, auditor says I will not be able to continue with the said assignment. ROC has returned back saying, requested for a resubmission stating not a reasonable justification. So these kind of responses, these kind of resubmission liners have come from the side of the registrar of companies. They're taking it seriously. SEBI is taking it seriously. Stock exchanges are taking it seriously. And then we are having it all flowing across through WhatsApp groups. And then we're all commenting and discussing on the said issue that, okay, why resignation of auditors is not being taken as it is, unlike the previous times. So today they're talking about auditors in this perspective of resignation. Tomorrow they will talk about auditors not attending the general meetings of the company and not even informing the companies. Why? Because you also have a right to be heard at the general meeting in respect of the audit report that you have issued to the company. So you are not exercising your right as well. So somewhere it is emphasized from my end, and otherwise also as per law, that there is a requirement, one, to attend or to send somebody on your behalf, or to third, the easiest, requesting a leave of absence before in advance. Next, circulation of financial statements and other relevant documents. When we're talking about a notice of AGM, you will have to, under section 136, circulate certain documents to your members of the company. Now, what are those documents? Financial statements of the company, director's report, auditor's report. If there's a shorter notice, then there would be a shorter notice consent, which would also be sent for them to be signed and to be returned back. So those are required. Then there is one more requirement. Please remember the registers of the company are open for inspection at the time of general meeting. If your clients are conducting a virtual meeting, the notice should again carry that the registers are open for inspection virtually. How it will be conducted virtually, government has not stated, but they've said this year it is electronically this particular inspection can happen. So again, this line continues to stay as it is in the notice, but the word, if at all, if the AGM is shown to be conducted virtually, the term virtually should be additionally put up over there. Then here I also talk about companies where you have the directors sitting abroad. They cannot travel. Like if I talk about a country like Australia, Australia is outrightly telling people or NRIs or permanent residence card holders that in case if you get back to your own country, do not expect to be coming back here. So for those cases, if your directors are sitting there, your members are sitting here, how will you conduct a meeting? And if this particular meeting has to be conducted virtually, how will you conduct it? So you cannot say that, okay, my members are here, so I can conduct a physical meeting. No, you will have to conduct an electronic or a virtual meeting. Why? Because your members are here, your directors are there, and directors also need to be present. There may also be cases where your directors or members are sitting abroad, your auditor is here. Conduct a virtual meeting. Let them go through the process, record the particular meeting. Why? Because later they will not state that my professional did not guide me. And when I state this, that your profession, that they will say that my professional did not guide me. This is emanated from what the clients go ahead and state before NCLT. Now, many of you would have also gone through the process when companies were being revived or restoration of names of companies was happening before NCLT. If the early applications are to be seen, which were filed before the NCLT for that particular purpose of restoration of name of company, it stated no professional guidance was received. Proper professional guidance was not received. My professional did not guide me properly, and therefore it did not, it precluded me from going ahead with filing of the company. They do not take it on themselves. So it is always advisable that now, since the professionals are being blamed by the clients themselves in such kind of situations, when the companies got struck off, they blamed us. So today, to safeguard our skin, to safeguard ourselves, our professional skepticism, our professional understanding should make us do this particular act where they say that, okay, you're sitting there, you have the financial statements, we'll give you how to conduct the general meeting, you conduct it online, I will be present. And then get it closed. And that way, it's easier for you as well, it's easier for them as well. Next, annual form DIR3 KYC. The first time that it came, it was an e-form to be filed. Subsequently, for every year, for those who have done the e-form KYC for the first time, it is a web KYC. Right now, again, if the KYC is pending, till the company's fresh start scheme is there, those particular persons, they can go ahead and undertake their KYC. And that is at no extra charge of those 5,000 rupees or 10,000 rupees as applicable for KYC and INC 22A. This was quarter two. Why I said DIR3 KYC for quarter two was because till September 30 earlier, they said that the deadline for KYC shall be September 30. Now again extendable to December 31st. Quarter three, AOC4. So 30th September, we've had our AGMs. Next 30 days, we need to file our AOC4. Next 60 days, we need to file our MGT7, MGT8. So AOC4, what all do I have to mandatorily file? I will have to mandatorily file my financial statements. That is my balance sheet, my statement of profit and loss account, director's report, auditor's report. Please remember within 30 days of holding of AGM. So the AGM date also has to be included. Similar case for annual return. And in case of every private company, you will have to have it filed, signed by a company secretary in practice as well. Now I come to quarter four. Now earlier I stated that if I talk about quarter four, on a first quarter three here, this point number 16 falls within quarter three. But point number 14 and 15 is something that is applicable for throughout the year. Say, for example, if I have a board meeting I will have to have a 120 days gap plus special 60 days extra gap for COVID-19 relaxation. Then I will have to have a specific 7 days notice in respect of board meetings. I will have to have, say, the notes, the agenda papers, the other documents that are relevant as board pack to be sent to the directors well in advance. I will have to seek their consent well in advance. I will have to send the minutes within a specified time period for their comments. Once approved, then I will have to share the approved financial board minutes with the respective directors. So those particular requirements, section 173 section and the secretarial standard 1 shall have to be complied throughout the year. Then I come to section 88 with other applicable sections. You have to maintain the statutory registers. Like for example, register of directors, there would be a change every time a new director is appointed or an earlier director ceases to be a director. Second, register of directors shareholdings. Promoter directors or the executive directors may have shareholdings, barring the others, subject to 2%. Register of members. So any change in list of members or the shareholders would cause you to have a change effected in the register of members also. In case if you have dematerialized shares, the DP shall maintain the data, and the Benpost data shall be provided to the company also and maintained for the company by the RTA and the depository participant. The related party transactions. Say today I've had a related party transaction in my company. If I don't have a board meeting as in date, and if my board has the powers, it can get into that particular transaction and get it ratified in the subsequent board meeting. So the board shall take note of that particular transaction and ratify the said transaction in subsequent board meeting, and that shall be effected and stated in the register of related party transactions in that particular board meeting where it is being taken note of. And similarly, as and when whatever register, say registers of loans, guarantees, investments, whatever register of contracts, whatever is applicable at a particular basis, a particular transaction, basis a particular event, those particular statutory registers shall have to be maintained by the company throughout the year. So whenever that event happens, that register has to be, a change has to be effected into that particular register. This is again applicable for every company, not mandatorily an MSME, but even an MSME has to be specific. It cannot say that, okay, I do not need to take care of such compliances because maybe I do not have many transactions. मेरा turnover छोटा है company का, government मेरे पीछे नहीं आएगी. That is one usual line which comes for clients. कि मैं MSME हूँ, मेरे पास ज़्यादा पैसा है नहीं, मेरा turnover छोटा है, मैं कोई टाटा अंबानी तो हूँ नहीं. So that is not how the government functions. The government says you're a company, you have to mandatorily comply. It will not think that whether it is an MSME, if it is non-compliant, it is non-compliant. Now I come to additional annual compliances by public companies, and before I move for that, I would probably give a minute's time to the esteemed members here for any queries in respect of what we've covered till now.
Madam, I request we'll take last 15-20 minutes question and answers, madam. Panel discussion with the ones.
Sure.
Another 5-10 minutes to conclude, and after that 20 minutes, 15 to 20 minutes, we'll have complete question and answers. One
Sure.
to one.
Sure, Imanji.
Other
I'll
than you can
take
take
it accordingly. We'll take it accordingly then.
Yeah.
Now, these are some additional compliances which are applicable for public limited companies. Why I'm taking it? Because it is not that MSME differentiates between a public or a private. It differentiates on the basis of investment and turnover together. Only a listed company generally shall be out of that particular ambit. But otherwise, it is a public or a private categorization. And it is a micro, small, and medium. So whatever way it fits up into even a public company, you will have to go ahead with this kind of a compliance. First, I'll talk about here PAS6. Now, this is very new to us relatively, though it came in the year 2018. That for the second half year end date 2018-19, October to March, you will have to file this first. Then you go ahead with 2019-20, 2 quarters, 2 half years. So within 60 years from that end of half year, you have to file up this particular reconciliation of share capital audit report. Now, the share capital or reconciliation of share capital audit report, if we see the initiation of this kind of a reporting, it first came for a listed company where it has to be filed on the basis of every quarter. Now, listing agreement had it there. The LODR has it there now, subsequent to the listing agreement. Here, they came up with specific regulations and they said that PAS 6 shall have to be filed by every public company. There is a specific exemption. They say it is not applicable on a private company. Why? Because it is specifically applicable on a public company. So this public company under Rule 983 should have its shares in dematerialized forms. And once the shares are in a dematerialized form, you have your ISIN number, then you will have to file this reconciliation of share capital audit report. Now, what is required in the form? You have to put your ISIN data. You have to put how many shares are in the dematerialized form, how many shares are not in the dematerialized form. Those kinds of data shall be filled up in this particular form, and half yearly return, just like your MSME form, this half yearly return in respect of share capital has to be filed by every company. Now, this has to be audited by a practicing company secretary. Now, there was something which came from the side of the ICSI also, which said that only peer-reviewed firms, partners of peer-reviewed firms or members of peer-reviewed firms shall be able to conduct this share capital audit or reconciliation of share capital audit. So that is still under consideration. They're coming in a staggered manner on that. But PAS 6 definitely, despite specific staggering of the final form being put up in the public domain, which finally came in the month of July this year. So finally, this particular form being to be filed is already due, and our clients which have shares in dematerialized form or our clients which are public companies specifically shall have to go ahead and file this. So even if my share capital is not in dematerialized form, but I'm a public company, I will still have to go ahead, file this form and state I do not have an ISIN number and my shares are not in dematerialized form. Then the consequent action shall be taken care of by the ROC. Then I come with the section 117 resolutions, NGT 14 to be filed on every subsequent action. One of the most major ones that happens every year, we take the balance sheet signing date. Say my auditor and my directors of the company, they've signed the balance sheet on 4th of September 2020, say 25 days, 21 days, and we say, okay, still we'll take that 25 days so that notice reaches after, on time before the AGM. So we take it as 4th of September generally or 5th of September. So what happens? If it's signed on 4th September, we put up a resolution stating for approval of directors' report and financial statements. We have to file it to the ROC because it is a public company. So despite being an MSME, I can be a public company, and if I'm a public company and an MSME together, I will have to file this form. Next, certain other e-forms and secretarial audit which are applicable on public companies. MR1, in respect of, say, appointment or reappointment of my full-time director, my managing director, my manager of a company, company secretary of the company, CEO or CFO of the company, I will have to file this specific MR1 form as and when required. Now, there's also a concept of rotation of directors. So rotation, I need not talk about this particular form, but say when I am elevating a director or redesignating a director from just being a director to an executive director or director to a full-time director, then at that point of time, I will have to file this MR1 for change in designation of that particular director or redesignation as WTD or ED. Second, appointment or change in terms of appointment of a director. So if it's a normal director or change in terms, so while I'm talking about MR1 for a WTD or MR1 for an ED, MR1 ke saath I will have to file an MGT 14 because there are changes in terms of conditions of the appointment of a particular director. Then if I have to have an independent director or a woman director basis the threshold limits, because when I'm talking about the investment criteria, when I'm talking about the turnover criteria, we may meet the limits which are required otherwise for the which mandate otherwise the appointment of an independent director or the appointment of a woman director or the appointment of an internal auditor. Then DIR 12 or MGT 14 as the case maybe shall also have to be filed under the specific rules. So these are other compliances. Then another one could be a public company, an unlisted public company, which is an MSME, and it shall have to comply with the CSR compliance. So borrowings, turnover, capital. I'll see the criteria. If either of it fits, and I will have to undertake the CSR compliance, then the corporate social responsibility compliance shall have to be undertaken. The committee shall have to be formed. CSR policy shall have to be formed. What kind of activities the company can undertake under the CSR activities, I will have to be considering in the CSR. I'll have to state in the CSR policy in terms of reference of the committee, and the CSR committee shall also have to state it. Specific action shall have to be undertaken. Those activities shall have to be monitored and shall have to be then reported and updated to the board members in the board of to the specific board of directors collectively in the board meeting. So that also happens specific based on the thresholds. And one of the major thresholds that we see there is turnover. And turnover, we are also considering for the categorization in terms of your MSME, micro, small, and medium enterprise. So this is independent director, woman director, internal auditor, and I'll also add here CSR. So these are certain specific areas which come to you by virtue of those threshold limits, which are applicable, which are from the perspective of categorization as MSME and from the perspective of other threshold or applicabilities in terms of compliances which come for us as when we talk of companies. Now, there are specific set of companies which have to have a secretarial audit under section 205. Now, what happens here? This secretarial audit, I said, would be just like you have the financial statements audit, where you go ahead and deal with the financial statements. Similarly, on whatever laws are applicable in the company, a secretarial auditor would be appointed to get through and check whether or not these laws have been complied in letter and spirit, and accordingly, a true and fair opinion in respect of the compliance level of the company shall be issued by the secretarial auditor. With that, I close down the session. I hope well within the limit, Hemant ji. And now I await the queries and the questions which come from the members.
Thank you very much, madam. Wonderful. It's
Thank you so much.
enlightening of all of us. We'll take a few set of question and answers from our members.
I think I've already, okay, so there's one
Yeah,
question
yeah,
which I have already received. Can a company seek exemption from appointing a woman director? I have come across a group of listed companies who've not appointed a woman director. Sir, this is if there is a requirement of having a woman director on board, the woman director shall have to be appointed. Not if you see newspapers for last 4 years, many a times list of say public sector undertakings which have not had women directors appointed on their board despite having the requirement have been stated. SEBI has been taking out certain lists. If you go to the Prime database, they have specific list of companies where these particular directors are not appointed. So there's a specific non-compliance at their end. They're deliberately not doing it. They may entail further action at their end from the side of the government. So no exemption otherwise can be sought from the side of the government for this. This is a non-compliance, plainly, blankly, frankly.
Yes, sir.
Sir, we are unable to hear you.
Sir, unmute.
He's unmuted. He's not audible.
Sir, you can speak. Sir, you can speak. Okay, fair enough. Another question from Chartered Accountant Swaminathan sir. Whether AGM notice has been sent to cost auditors also?
Yes, if there are cost auditors, it has to be sent.
Okay.
They are also your auditor. The term when you talk about auditors in the secretarial standards, it does not differentiate between any of the auditors. They say auditors. And when we come to the definition of auditors, specifically when we deal within companies at definition section, it talks about all the auditors.
Correct.
It does not say that, okay, a statutory auditor only or a secretarial auditor only. It says whatever auditors are applicable in respect of the company, may it be an internal auditor also, may it be a cost auditor also. If there are any such auditors, all will have to receive. I think Bashekar ji, I would suggest आप use करें earphone. We were unable to hear you.
Bashkar sir.
Yes.
Audible now. Audible.
Yes, sir. Go ahead, sir. Any
You
question?
want me to ask what? Finished this? Should I go for?
No, sir. Madam, one more question from our member that for financial year 2015 and 16, for a
Right.
private limited company, based on the profitability, they are touching the requirement to comply the CSR. Technically, that year they could not able to comply. Now, subsequently, this year during the audit, they've only identified the requirement of the compliance of CSR. Whether what is the procedure they have to follow for complying the CSR activity for the current period? Is there any provision created and current year they can spend the money, or what sort of disclosure requirement for audit report as well as financial statement and board's report?
Hemanji, first of all, I would request, since this is slightly a lengthier question, if the same can be posted to the chat portal so that I can see it simultaneously and attend to every part of that particular question. That would be easier so that the question does not
Okay.
stay unanswered.
Okay. This is over, and secretarial audit is over, and more or less, I think chat box questions are over, madam.
Yes, chat box questions more or less are over. So if this question, if you could either share it on the chat portal, or maybe if you have received it on your phone through WhatsApp from any member,
So,
then maybe you share it on phone.
no, simple single sentence. In year 2015-16,
So 2015-16, there was a CSR applicability that the company did not comply with the CSR provisions.
now
Right.
they,
So 2015-16, whoever did not comply, there was subsequent action by the government, they would have received a notice. If they have not, and action was initiated before the MM. If action is not initiated, they are very lucky. The second, the auditor should have reported in the year 16-17 when they were doing the audit for 15-16 that company did not comply with the CSR provisions. If not stated by the auditor in that year's report, negligence on the part of the auditor, subsequent action can be taken against the auditor also by the MCA when such an action is identified. Now, if I correctly remember, you stated that this year again there is a compliance over that particular company in respect of CSR provisions.
no,
What
this,
they have to do?
this year not required, but this year whether they can comply the 15-16 wala now. This voluntary they will come out. This is
Now, here. Can I just quickly ask back if that person is still here who's asked this question? If that particular company did not undertake the CSR provision compliance that year, did it state as to why it could not undertake the CSR compliance in the board report of the company or not? If it has stated
oversight, they could not able to see the provision. Now they realized.
now they have realized, so nothing is forming part of the board's report also. So compliance in respect of section 134 in respect of board report is also not there. I think 134E probably talks about CSR not thing.
But
Section
there is a
135
provision.
in case if there is,
There is a provision in the Companies Act. Any CSR activity was missed out in earlier years. Now they can voluntarily comply for the
they
subsequent.
can, but here please also remember that person has failed to note it in the board report also. So this year when they do it, they will have to state that it pertains to that particular year. Then they did not have a CSR committee composition. They cannot today say that now I have composed a CSR committee. Now they will also have to look that is this provision still applicable in that particular company?
No.
No. So now they cannot prospectively compose or have a CSR committee being created today for a retrospective applicability. So probably the board today can take a cognizance of this fact, note it, and then say that, okay, this was the applicability, this was the amount that was supposed to be spent in respect of the CSR activity. And what this particular company can then say then is that they will be identifying this particular area, maybe the local area or the other areas of operations of that particular company, and having that mandatory CSR spent in respect of that particular area by the company, and they are not going into composition of CSR committee because the said provisions are not applicable as on date. So that together can suffice as compliance, and the company may file an MGT 14 suo motu.
Compounding can.
Compounding is required. Compounding is required.
Yeah.
Because non-composition
Hello?
of the said committee is
Go ahead,
also
sir. Arunachal, sir.
non-compliance.
Yeah, Arunachal,
Hello.
sir.
Yeah, independent directors
Yes, sir.
of listed company is different from the other company.
No.
Independent director appointed by listed company is different from other companies.
No, sir, not at all. I'll give you my example. I am an independent director with a listed company. I am an independent director with a public unlisted company also. So you can be appointed with both types of companies as well. There's no difference. You just need to clear the, you just need to have a DIN number. You need to clear the examination which is conducted by the IICA for this purpose and get enrolled with them. And you should have your number that comes, the director ID that comes with the IICA, that should be valid for that particular course or duration. Then you can be appointed as independent director with any sort of a company.
For the joint stock company with the Tamil Nadu government, listed company also joint stock company with Tamil Nadu government. For that, we have to get the permission of the central government.
Listed company.
Independent directors appointed for the joint stock company and the listed company.
Sir, if the board of the company or the nomination and remuneration committee of the company has already selected you as a candidate to be appointed as an independent director, then I think
Independent
there is no
director.
specific approval required from the side of the government. It is the nomination and remuneration committee that shall have a call on that appointment.
Okay, thank you. See, it's not everything.
Any questions, Sridhar sir? Sridhar sir?
Any further questions, Hemant
Any
ji?
other questions, Swaminathan sir, Sridhar sir?
I think Bashekar ji also raised his hand for something.
Yeah, Bhaskar ji, first chance.
So in the interim, when we have another person coming, Bashekar ji, I may want to have your question till then.
Yeah, Bhaskar ji.
I have a small question. See, due to COVID, a lot of problems are arising. Because last year they might have made a profit and they will be liable to have a CSR spending. But in the first half, due to COVID, the company's operations could be in trouble. So what will happen to the complaints? Can they have any seek exemption saying that the company has gone into trouble? The first half is showing loss. And we have got time to spend that CSR, and this, especially in 2021 will be a serious problem for many companies who have been badly affected by COVID. How will they deal with that situation?
I concur with what you say, that okay, there would be certain companies, when we talk about 2019-20, they would have had a huge turnover, landing up into a liability for CSR spending for them, and subsequently in 2020-21, the first half, we've seen many businesses practically not functional, many companies coming to the point of closure as well, not having operations, low operations, or no operations. So in that kind of situation, first of all, for the last year's spending, what the companies can do is they can, they have 6 more months. They may decide to spend in the next 6 months after earning. 2, they may spend a part and note in their board report that since the company did not earn well and since the company did not operate for first 6 months, so the company's previous year's earnings went into managing or the company's operations for the first 6 months. So therefore, the company does not have the relevant requisite funds which were required for the purpose of CSR. So they are maybe creating an internal reserve, or they will spend the next year this particular spending which was required or mandatory to be spent for this particular year as in respect of financial year 2019-20, since the provision of the law also states that any unspent amount can be created as a reserve and the company can state in the board's report as to what is the reason of non-compliance or non-spending. So that should suffice. And the government is not like in the mode, if I say, of talking about too much of non-compliance, considering it's giving too many relaxations. So as far as here we talk about the professional circles, or when we talk about the ministry personals also, and say their interactions otherwise, they're not so serious this year about all of this. They may soon come out with a relaxation in that respect also.
Yeah.
So a note in the board's report should suffice, and you create a reserve in your balance sheet for that.
Swaminathan sir want to speak. Swaminathan sir. Yeah. Kindly raise your hand so that I can allow you to speak, or you can unmute yourself and speak. Sridhar sir? Yeah, I think. Any other question? Okay. Now the time for our deputy convener sir to convey our word of thanks formally to our good friend Jain madam. Over to
All right, Hemanji, if you give me a minute's time.
please, please.
Though it is not related to the topic that we're dealing with right now, but
Please.
a quick question to all the members here. How will you file the CFSS form, company's fresh start form? E-form CFSS is supposed to come. How will you file that form? Because there would be some companies, there would be many forms which were filed under this particular scheme. And you may have to remember all the SRNs, you may have to key all the SRNs. Or what do you think will be the mechanism from the side of the government? I have the answer. I want to hear what is your understanding. Or what do you people think? Then I'll come forward with the answer to it. What do you think about how the e-form CFSS is supposed to be?
Sir Bhaskar ji,
I don't have an answer.
He doesn't have an answer right now. Still, any other member here? E-form CFSS. How do you think they will come out with it? It's yet to come out once the compliances are undertaken, once all the forms are filed till 31st of December. So this will be launched as of now on 1st of January, earlier to be launched on 1st of October. Hemanji, do you have an answer?
no, madam. I'm not in that.
No. Okay, nobody else also trying to attempt. So this would be something similar to the web KYC, something similar to the SPICE form, where the database, MCA database, once you insert the name of the company, when you log in and you insert the name of the company, you put the SIN number, it would automatically fetch what all forms were filed in respect of that particular company which fall within the CFSS. And after the MCA fetches it on its own, then you can file the form. And they also may come with an OTP system, just like they have for the web KYC. They may come with an OTP system without the DSC to file this particular form as well.
Good.
So quickly, members, do not get worried that you'll have to keep a complete track. You'll have to maintain the SRNs. So you have to maintain SRNs for your own professional due diligence that, okay, yes, these were the forms which we were filing in this particular scheme that came out from the side of the government. But as stated by R.D. West, erstwhile R.D. West in one of the earlier seminars where he was a co-speaker. So he stated that it would be a web-based form and we professionals need to not to be worrying on that aspect, and we can continue working without considering the hassle that, okay, while we are filing, we need to be prepared for this. They will fetch it on their own. And for those particular forms, once you file that CFSS, you will have the immunity certificate. So right now, for whatever compliance in respect of these companies, which are MSME and non-MSMEs, please undertake the pending compliances before 31st of December and file that particular form after 31st of December electronically in that web-based form. With that, I conclude. Over to you, Hemanji, again.
Thank you. Now time for formal vote of thanks from your good friend.
Good evening, everybody. I think all of you will accept that it is a wonderful and very informative session on some of these areas which are not directly connected but with the secretarial auditor. But as a statutory auditor, we have a lot of responsibility to see that there are compliances. In that case, it was a very, very informative session. I thank you, Rimaji, for taking time off from your busy schedule and sharing your experience and knowledge with us. We will expect you to share with you some more occasion where we'll give you another topic where you will share all your knowledge and practical experience with us. Thank you.
So
Thank you so much, Dashikriti.
let me register my vote of thanks to all members, despite the tax audit busy schedule of all chartered accountants, come out and join for this today's session. I thank one more time Rima Jainji for giving this fine opportunity. One more thanks to Facebook for joining us both of us remaining last 3 years. Catch you some other time. Thank you very much. Bye bye. Have a nice time. Have a nice weekend. See you all.